Mark Westcott here, and welcome today to Estate and Succession Mastery. Today I'm up in Toowoomba. We're being remote today, so someone asked the other day, am I going to be doing this one day when I'm flying in the plane or something like that? So I'm hoping not, and Juanita will be joining us here in a minute. So what I'd like to just suggest to anyone that's watching, and I've got someone online there, any questions you might have, please feel free to just put them in the chat section there, and happy to answer those as we go along. And here's Juanita, fresh from her trip to Cairns. Hi Juanita, how are you today?
Hi Mark, how are you?
Very good, thanks. So,
that's good.
A safe trip back, which is great.
Good to be home.
Okay. I thought we'd talk today about our process. I get a lot of questions in regard to being able to explain to people what is the succession planning process that we use, and I hope that you'll be able to see that on your screen. So I hope it's big enough for you to have a look at.
Yep.
I'll just see if that makes any difference. No, not enough to cut our faces out. But I just want to go through, and I'll just get rid of one of those banners there, so you can see that more easily. So yes, we've been doing a lot of work with clients. This is probably our best work to date, putting together a 9-step process to really create peace of mind for clients in regard to their estate and their succession planning matters. And one of the first things we do is to sit down and have a good old cup of tea, cuppa and a chat. And I think, Juanita, you would understand the value in this, in being able to just, a lot of people in estate and in succession planning matters always start with what I call hard facts. In other words, okay, let's sit down, let's talk about your assets, your liabilities, your structures and all that sort of stuff. My belief is it's better to start with the heart and to sit down with people and find out, what's in their heart, what they really want for their family and loved ones. Juanita,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think the good starting point is just in layman's terms explaining what your wishes are and what your hopes are and what you want to see in the future. And there's no lawyer words in that. It's just straight from the heart and out of your mouth what your wishes are, and that's a starting point. And I think then it's up to the professionals to work through that and get to the result.
Look, absolutely. One of the tools we use in the first part of our process is the estate vision, and I'm just putting together, for example, a webinar where we're just updating the content of our webinar, and I'm using one of the examples of clients we had in Albany a couple of years ago, where I went through the estate vision with them. And it was kind of like a watershed moment for me. It really reinforced the power of asking, good or great questions of people. And the estate vision we talked about a few weeks ago, where we just go through and ask personal questions rather than getting down to hard facts. As I say, it's asking questions of the heart. And you could see that the people we were talking to, it was all of a sudden they started to think of their children as kids again. It was a really rewarding experience for me, because instead of thinking about, one of them's running the farm, one of them's doing something else, it made them think about, as human beings, what would they want for each of their kids. There was no conversations around the amounts of money or anything like that. It was just like, okay, have we got any kids that are going to need more of a hand up than another one? Do we need to reward one of our children in regard to what they've done in regard to creating value in helping the business grow and so on? And also from a relationship point of view, I think people have more confidence in being open and honest and building a relationship if you ask the right sort of questions, don't they?
That's right. And often at this stage, or even any stage, there'll be a question that someone will say, oh geez, I hadn't thought about that. And that's okay, because it's, it's our job to bring those things up and help that thought process along. So decisions don't need to be made on the spot, but having that conversation helps generate the mind and start thinking about what direction you want this to go to.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And that actually sort of leads us straight into the second step, which is what we call the burning issues, and that's really around. Was it Donald Rumsfeld talked about the unknown unknowns? I used to call it the unaware squared trap. In other words, you don't know what you don't know. And whichever way you like to refer to it, it's the things that you haven't thought of or that no one's ever asked you that will always trip you over and catch you up in life. And so what we do is after we have the initial conversation with people and find out what's in their heart, it's to go through and take them through a process of asking them about 60 or 70 questions we have, which help people to understand, help us to understand that we've asked all the right questions, and then we can create an issues list. And it was actually Tom that came up with the concept, Juanita, of the burning issues. So I loved it, so I've stolen that from him.
Yeah, and often there'll be particular issues that are top of someone's mind that keeps them awake at night sometimes, or is really important to them. So by identifying them particularly, we can make sure that we address those and take a bit of that worry, I suppose, out of the client's mind, and make sure that those burning issues are particularly addressed.
Absolutely. In some ways it's a projects list, but it's trying to understand all the things that maybe people hadn't thought of before, or they need to go away and think of. And it's a really valuable part of the process is understanding, because that's really the blueprint, I guess, for what we need to do, the things we need to solve moving forward, and so on. Now, the third part, you talked about this, it was either last week or the week before, I think, Juanita, was in regard to due diligence. And once we've had a chat with people, and remember, this is the process that I take all our clients through. Once we've had a chat, once we've worked out what the key, the burning issues are, then we need to do due diligence, which is really, this is where we hand over to Juanita and her team, is basically to say, well, okay, are we building all this estate and succession planning on a solid foundation, or are there some things out of shape? So do you just want to recap what you do with the due diligence?
Sure, and it's basically a checklist for us to make sure we've considered all the relevant documents and estate planning issues. So during this due diligence process, we'll have a look at what documents are already in place. If we have different entities that the client might have, we'll have a look at those documents that relate to those entities, such as trust deeds, company searches, partnership agreements, shareholders agreements, as I said, existing enduring powers of attorney or wills, although they will obviously be replaced eventually. And then also look at any particular issues that might relate to, for example, if the client has a business, if there's any personal liability risk. So basically just work through a checklist of all these particular issues to highlight or to check in our mind if any of these things will particularly relate to you when you're doing your estate planning.
Fantastic. And so what we talk about, those the first three steps in the process there, we talk about them being the foundation, and that is, we're really in all instances talking about how do we get the foundations right here. How do we have the right conversation with someone when we first meet them and ask them the right questions and check that everything is in place and as it should be. We know that all the work we do from this point on is built on strong foundations. So Absolutely. That's kind of like stage one of our process, I guess. Now, the next point is we go up one here is family harmony. So that becomes our fourth step. And maybe you want to talk about some of your experiences and where things have gone wrong here, Juanita. Put us some thoughts you have there.
Yeah, I guess having also had experience in estate litigation at the other end when there's disputes about matters is very useful in my experience, because we can address some of these things right up front now as part of the estate planning. So as far as the family harmony goes, we're talking about what your wishes are for particular members of your family when you pass away. As we've said in some of our previous podcasts, fair doesn't necessarily mean equal. So how you wish to distribute your wealth. And if there's any particular perhaps issues that you want to talk about with relation to particular family members.
Sure, absolutely. In fact, I guess it's appropriate. I'm up in Toowoomba at the moment. We've just had a meeting. Tom and I have just had a meeting with some clients, and this was one of the issues which really raised. So think mum, dad, 3 kids, one of them on the farm, the other 2 not on the farm, and so I quizzed mum and dad effectively and said, well, okay, how are the other 2 going to feel about the way you're have you had conversations? Have you talked to your children about the fact that maybe you're going to put them together into a business if something happened to you? And I talked about the dangers of that. And I've said this many times: is that you can't solve problems from within the family. It's the hardest way in the world is for mum and dad to have chats with their kids about what they want to asking the children what they want to happen, because children aren't always sort of forthcoming in naturally telling the truth to mum and dad if they think it might hurt their feelings, or if they don't want to rock the boat or something like that. So, from this meeting today, I sort of convinced the parents to let me go and have a talk to each of their 3 kids, so we could make sure that there was real consensus and there was real harmony, and whatever mum and dad were planning on doing in regard to the distribution of their estate wasn't going to cause conflict between the kids, and was going to allow the children to get on with their life and in an enhanced way, obviously, in a grateful way, without there being any fights afterwards. Because the worst thing that can happen is your kids don't get together and talk at Christmas time. So it's always my goal, and that's why this is so important.
And I think this is the word that we've spoken a lot about, Mark, in our podcast. Communication comes in here, doesn't it? So this is where the value of communication is before one passes away, to help ensure that there will be ongoing harmony, and conversations can help a lot to allay people's concerns and expectations, and deal with these things during one's lifetime, rather than leave a big fat mess after one passes away.
A fight, a dog fight, a squabble, whatever we want to call it, but we can on live Facebook. The next step, you talked about this a second ago in regard to distribution and so on. The 5th step in our process is going through the distribution matrix, and normally I do this in conjunction with the solicitors as well, with you guys. And the distribution matrix is basically, and we did that today with these clients, is saying, okay, let's look at all the assets. How do we distribute this fairly, not equally necessarily, but how do we distribute this fairly? Bear in mind, if one child's been working on the farm for 20 years and the other 2 haven't, you've got to create fairness, not equality. But also, how do we distribute the assets so that if you are leaving one child with the business, you're not leaving some of the key assets for that business to other children who might then be able to hold their brother or sister to ransom. So, you've got to look at ways where you distribute it so that whoever ends up with a business, and that may be more than one child, you might have more than one business, that they can run those businesses independently of each other, and but it still creates fairness for the other children. I'll just say there that where you do have different businesses, so leave them unimpeded by their other siblings, so that they're free to get on. And I think the worst thing that you can do is actually force your children to be in business together.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
Yeah, such as parents sometimes go, but if we want to keep the family together and we build up this beautiful business, and wouldn't it be lovely if all the kids could work together and blah blah blah. I'm just going to tell you now, you've got more chance of finding a unicorn than that happening. So it's always a good idea to create independence for each of your kids, I think.
Absolutely, and obviously there will be some circumstances where the children working together might be appropriate, but usually it's really useful, and again, this should be communicated, to allow your children to move forward in life without dependency on each other, whether that be with properties or with company assets, etc. This step is also very useful addressing an issue that is often not thought of or thought through properly, and that's capital gains tax and related issues. So you might leave a property to one child and a second property to another one, but you haven't thought through necessarily what the capital gains tax issues are down the track, should they want to sell those properties. And so by not thinking that through, it may be that you actually leave a totally unequal gift or burden one with more tax than the other. So in this step, that's also an important thing that we do, is have a look at different assets and properties and what tax and liability issues they'll carry with them. So we're really clear on what each family member will receive with any encumbrances and liabilities attached.
Sure, that's right. And that can create huge inequality in estates when you don't think that through properly. You know, you might be so, we're going to leave Harry this wonderful property overlooking the ocean, but it's, you know, it turns up with a $500,000 tax liability, and the property has to be sold to be able to pay that tax liability, for example. And I mean, that's just one instance of where, you know, the greatest of intentions turned to dust because people didn't think through the results. Okay, let's talk about protected prosperity now. This is a very, very important part of the whole process, and this is where you're protecting against things such as divorce, bankruptcy, your bloodline risks, and so on, premature death, and making sure that whatever you leave for your family is protected through the generations, just in case there is a divorce in the family, somebody goes bankrupt or whatever. You don't want your wealth being transferred down to be dissipated to the wrong people. And so, you know, a lot of the work that you do, the work that I do with Tom and so on as well, Juanita, is about when we get people to this stage and we work out what their distribution is to be. We've created, you know, harmony within the family. We've made sure the foundations are right and so on. Now, this is the really important part, because doing this properly can save millions of dollars in estates being lost to certain situations. So, do you want to cover a bit here without getting too detailed? Just cover how we protect people's prosperity here.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different types of wills. I guess you can have a basic will, and you can have a more structured will, such as a testamentary trust will, which we will often use for clients with significant wealth. And then there's different types of testamentary trust wills with different layers of protection. So in order to address any of those issues that you particularly raised there, Mark, being the future potential relationship breakdown of a child or a beneficiary, if you have concerns about them being able to manage their funds or their inheritance going forward, most people would like their inheritance or their wealth to stay in their bloodline during further generations and not be sort of go sideways if due to numerous reasons, such as early death or and for those reasons, we can particularly structure the estate planning to provide better mechanisms to have some control over those issues. So this is where the real value in the documents and the plan comes in. I guess particularly going back to address some of those burning issues that we spoke about right at the start, and making sure that the best protection and the value for what you're paying for your estate planning is really picked up here.
Absolutely. You're right about the burning issues. I mean, this is the time when the things we identified as issues, like they might have children with special needs, they might have children with gambling problems, alcohol problems, or they know one of their kids is about to get divorced, for example, or whatever, or they just can't control.
Maybe in a high-risk business. And you just want to protect that. And you know, these are all, I guess, worst-case scenarios, but it's a fact of life that a lot of these things happen. And by putting that best protection in place now at this stage, it can really prevent the inheritance being lost should your child be exposed to any of those things down the track. And you know, we could be talking 20, 30 years, a long time down the track. So putting it in place now will protect it later on.
Absolutely. Thanks, Juanita. And that sort of covers off the second step in our process, which is all about the family issues. So here we've talked about, one, getting the family harmony right first, Two, the distribution matrix, which talks about fairness within the family. So to make sure there's, you know, from both those instances, it's all about, you know, eliminating the squabble, so to speak, and making sure there's no, excuse me, conflict, communication issues, making sure people can talk properly together. Excuse me. The third part of that is protecting the prosperity, protecting the wealth of the family for future generations. So that's stage two, which is all about the family. Now we start talking about, what I talk about is the future, and the future is to make sure, and you know, this is where I become a pain in everyone's backside for the accountants and the lawyers
in the
and
best
so on.
In the best possible way, Mark.
Well, that's right. With the best intentions is following up and making sure the documents are finalised, they're signed, they're sealed, they're delivered, because otherwise these things can just go on and on for months and months and months. And you know, and certainly I've seen this with other professional advisors. You know, everyone has the greatest of intention, but you know, I'd love a dollar for every time I've seen it. Other lawyers, you know, non-specialist lawyers, send out documents to their clients and then never follow them through to make sure they're signed or completed. So our job is to make sure, as we did with the client today, make sure that the things we promised to provide for the clients happen in a timely manner, and they are signed off and protection is put in place. And that's actually probably one of my greatest, not beefs, but certainly one of the greatest issues for me is to make sure that the documents are signed, because even if it's not 100% right, even if the clients think, well, maybe we'll change this, maybe we'll change that, you know, I just about drag them kicking and screaming and say, look, sign these draft documents, and at least you've got 80% right, if it's not, even if it's not 100% right. So that's an important part of the puzzle for me.
Absolutely, and it's important to realise that there are particular ways these documents need to be signed and witnessed. So, you know, it's always we'll often have our preference is to have clients to come in and sign and witness them with them, but sometimes there'll be a need to send them out. However, it's just very important to make sure they're signed correctly, Mark. Not only signed, but signed and witnessed correctly. The wills and the enduring powers of attorney have different signing and witnessing requirements. So having everything in place, signed off, nice and neat, that's really important here. And you're right, it's important. I think it's better to have something in place than nothing. And as we've spoken about previously, it's always important to review your estate planning down the track on any changes. But having something in place will give you peace of mind and allow you to tick that off that checklist that's been sitting there for such a long time.
Absolutely. We've got to get those lists ticked off.
Love a good checklist.
Okay, the next stage is the human elements. And I think this is by itself probably one of the most valuable. I know I say that's about every step in the process, but to me, this is the real meat and potatoes in the whole package. And the human elements, this is the stuff that no other advisors do. Lawyers don't do it, accountants don't do it, other financial planners don't do it, and so on. This is your opportunity to leave instructions to make life simple for those that are left behind. And this includes things like the Dear Mary letter, the Leave Well Communique. Now, these are all just words to you, but the Leave Well Communique basically is all about, you know, where do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? All the funeral type instructions. What music do you want playing? What do you want on your coffin? And so on. And I'm going to tell you that the things in here, like the first 90 days, what people should do for the 90 days after someone passes, the tactical team, making sure you've got all the right people to help your family so that when you're gone, there's someone around that can guide the family while they're going through emotional paralysis and so on. I'll get to the end of what I've started to say. This is the part of the process that most of my clients over the years talk about. Everybody wants to have their Dear Mary letter up to date, because that's really making sure that you leave nothing left unsaid for those left behind. And I really admire people that take the time to sit down and either write this out, record it by audio, do a video, as I do each year. I do a new video, so if anything happens to me or my family, are able to hear me say the things that I'd never want left unsaid, and you know, they know what I want to happen when I'm gone, and so on. And the words that I'd like to say for my kids, for my family members, my loved ones, and so on. I think this is your opportunity to document, record those. And I'm just a little aside, and I know I'm talking too much here, but just as a little aside, I've seen it, what happens when people die, and those that are left behind search their mobile phones for voice recordings. They ring the deceased dad's, mum's, loved one's phone so they can hear the message bank. They just want to hear the voice. And what we do is help people to make sure that you've left the right things for people so that when you've gone, they can grieve properly and they can still, hear from you and understand what you'd want for them. It's really important.
Yeah. I think it's a real comfort, Mark, to have all that in place and thought through. Having been through this experience myself, when someone's passed away, often, and in my circumstance, you don't know what music what songs, what poems, and it's just something that you've never thought of or never asked or never had that communication. There's that word again. So having those or knowing those things or, letting someone know those things just makes things so much easier when it's really hard for your family members after you've passed away. And it just takes that one little thing that will help them make that process easier for them.
Yeah, I can say, hand on heart, that I remember every client's spouse that's rung me after their partner has passed, how many times they've rung and said, Mark, can I get a copy of the Dear Mary letter? Mark, can I get a copy of the recording? Last year we had a client died, and I'll tell the story that the clients are happy for me to tell us. There were clients in Dubbo, and Mum died, and I had the copies of all the stuff that I'd done with them only less than a year before, unfortunately. It was an unfortunate death, and I had copies of what she wanted for her funeral. I knew she wanted arum lilies on her coffin. Now, I've never heard of arum lilies before, but that's what she wrote down. That's what she wanted. She nominated the music. She had no idea she was about to die, but she nominated the music she'd want as people were walking in, the music she'd want as people walked out. Now, I'm going to tell you, all the other good stuff we did for that family, the testamentary trust that Tom put in place for them, all the tax planning, the legal issues, all that good stuff, which was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars for them. The thing everybody at the funeral, they'd say, Mark's the guy that knew that she wanted arum lilies on her coffin. And, sometimes it's those little things that just mean the most. And you've got no idea what knowing that does to comfort those that are left behind. So step 8 is all about making sure that you make it easy for those that are left behind.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Step 9 is the future. It's about peace of mind, not just now, but on an ongoing basis. And once again, we talked about this in the last couple of weeks. What do people do when they get their will done? They flick it into their top drawer and they think they're safe for the rest of their lives. And we know that's not right. So step 9 here, the peace of mind step 9 is about having an annual ongoing relationship where each year we have a meeting, we sit down and we look at all, the distribution matrix, what's changed, what have they bought, what have they sold, and so on. Does anything need to be changed? And this is the part 2, the guardian advantage is where when someone passes away, basically I drop everything and turn up so that all the things that we've done in the planning with them, all the stuff we've done in stage 8, I can talk to them about. I can be there, help them, with the plans for the funerals and all those sorts of things. And this is real closure around, I guess, what we start with. We take people from being disorganised and not knowing what they want to at the end, where they're right at the end with them as well, with a fully documented plan, a fully written plan, and a fully understood plan on behalf of the family, but also not just what they want today, each year when we check in with them to make sure it's all kept up to date. And that's so important.
Yeah, lots of thoughts as you were talking there, Mark. I think absolutely these documents need to be reviewed regularly, but review doesn't necessarily mean change. A lot of people think, I don't want to go through the effort again or pay more money, but review them doesn't necessarily mean they need to be changed. It's checking that if circumstances have changed, if they do or not. I've seen circumstances where someone's passed away and the family can't find the will, or know the will is with a solicitor, but because there's no proof of death or death certificate yet, aren't able to access the will. So they don't know if there's any specific funeral wishes, etc. in there. So again, causes that extra angst. So by having these last two steps particularly in place really addresses that issue and allows things to happen more smoothly with less complication and less grief for the people left behind.
Absolutely. Our time is up again. Juanita, thank you for joining us today. I hope those who are watching this found the content valuable. Please feel free to send us a note, an email, or whatever on Facebook if you've got specific topics you want covered. And we look forward to seeing you again next week on Estate and Succession Mastery. Thanks, Juanita.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.